Imagine standing on an open plain at night. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. The wind is moving at 30 miles per hour, driving ice crystals into your skin like needles. There is no shelter for miles, no buildings, no roads, no fire waiting for you. The sky above is a void of cold stars, and the ground beneath your feet is frozen so hard that nothing will grow here for another 6 months. You are wearing modern winter clothing, a polyester jacket, insulated boots, gloves designed in a laboratory. You have perhaps 3 hours before hypothermia begins to shut down your body, perhaps 4 if you keep moving. But there is nowhere to go. Now imagine a figure walking toward you out of the darkness. They are wearing clothing you do not recognize. Layers of animal hide fitted so precisely to the body that no wind penetrates the seams. Their boots rise to the knee, stuffed with dried grasses that trap warm air against the skin. Their face is covered. Their movements are efficient, calm. They are not hurrying. They are not afraid. They have lived here their entire lives. Their parents lived here, their grandparents. For over 1,000 generations, their ancestors have walked this frozen world and not only survived it, but mastered it. And you, standing there in your laboratory-designed jacket, would be dead by morning. This is the reality we rarely confront. We look back at the Ice Age and imagine struggle, desperation, a species barely holding on, waiting for the glaciers to retreat so that real civilization could begin. But archaeology tells a different story. The Ice Age was not a brief interruption in human history. It was the environment in which modern humans became who we are. For over 200,000 years, our ancestors lived through climate conditions that would collapse modern infrastructure within weeks. They did this without electricity, without medicine, without written language, without anything we would recognize as technology. And yet they thrived, not in the way we define thriving today, not with abundance and comfort and surplus. They thrived in the way that matters most. They continued. Generation after generation, they passed on everything they knew. They raised children in frozen landscapes. They buried their dead with care and ritual. They created art in caves so deep that no natural light ever touched the walls. They were not primitive versions of us, waiting to evolve into something better. They were complete, fully adapted, fully intelligent. And they possessed capabilities that we have entirely forgotten. The first thing we underestimate is clothing. When modern researchers attempt to reconstruct Ice Age survival, they immediately encounter a problem. The cold is not merely uncomfortable, it is lethal with astonishing speed. Exposed skin in sub-zero wind loses heat so fast that frostbite can begin within minutes. A wet body in freezing air can die in under an hour. And yet Ice Age humans did not merely survive the cold. They hunted in it. They traveled in it. They raised children in it. The answer lies in what they wore. Archaeological sites across Europe and Siberia have yielded bone needles dating back over 40,000 years. These are not crude implements. They are refined, delicate tools with eyes so small they could only have been used with fine sinew thread. The skill required to produce them suggests generations of refinement. But here's what changes everything. Those needles were not for decoration, they were for tailoring. Ice Age humans did not simply wrap themselves in animal skins. They constructed fitted garments, layered systems designed to trap air, wick moisture, and allow movement. The difference between a loose hide and a tailored coat is the difference between life and death when the temperature drops below -30. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated this repeatedly. Researchers who attempt to survive in Arctic conditions using loose furs fail. Their bodies lose heat through gaps. Moisture accumulates. They become hypothermic. But when the same researchers wear reconstructed Ice Age clothing, fitted, layered, sealed at the wrists and ankles, they can function for hours in conditions that would otherwise kill them. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't luck. This was deliberate engineering, passed down through countless generations with the precision of a survival manual we can no longer read. The second thing we underestimate is fire. We imagine Ice Age humans crouched around flames, grateful for warmth, as if fire were a luxury they occasionally achieved. The reality is far more sophisticated. Fire was not just a tool for warmth. It was infrastructure. It was transported across landscapes. It was conserved for days, sometimes weeks, using techniques that modern survivalists struggle to replicate. In cold environments, starting a fire is brutally difficult, scarce when everything is frozen or damp. Flint and pyrite work, but they demand precise technique and ideal conditions. Once a fire goes out in deep winter, relighting it is not guaranteed. So Ice Age humans did something remarkable. They carried fire with them. Archaeological evidence suggests the use of slow-burning materials, fungi, dried moss packed in bark containers, that could smolder for hours or even days without fully igniting. These embers were nursed along during travel, protected from wind, fed carefully to keep them alive. Think about what this means. A group moving across a frozen landscape, carrying warmth with them like a living thing, knowing that if the ember died, their survival became uncertain. Developing rituals and responsibilities around firekeeping that were as serious as any duty in the group. Fire was also used to shape the environment. Controlled burns in grasslands drove prey into ambush zones. Fire cleared brush, encouraging new growth that attracted grazing animals. It hardened wooden spear tips. It processed adhesives for tool making. It rendered animal fat into durable, calorie-dense fuel. This wasn't primitive. This was fire as technology, fire as strategy, fire as a system understood in ways we no longer need to understand. The third thing we underestimate is hunting. We imagine Ice Age hunters as opportunistic, chasing whatever they could find, grateful for any kill. But the evidence tells a different story. Ice Age humans did not just hunt, they specialized. They targeted specific species with such consistency that their economies were built around single animals. In some regions, it was mammoth. In others, reindeer. In others, bison. This specialization required deep knowledge, not the kind of knowledge that can be written down, the kind that lives in the body. The ability to read tracks in snow and know how old they are, how fast the animal was moving, whether it was healthy or wounded. The ability to predict migration routes based on weather, season, vegetation. Ice Age hunters knew where the animals would be before the animals knew themselves. This was not instinct. This was science without instruments. Ecology understood through 100,000 hours of direct observation passed from parent to child in stories, demonstrations, and shared experience. And the hunts themselves were feats of coordination that modern teams would struggle to replicate. Killing a mammoth is not like killing a deer. A mammoth is a mountain of muscle, fat, and fury. It can crush a human with a single step. It can gore with tusks longer than a man is tall. And yet Ice Age humans killed them, regularly, successfully, with weapons made of stone and bone. This required ambush sites chosen for terrain advantage, coordination between hunters who could not speak to each other across distances, signals, timing, backup plans for when things went wrong. This wasn't luck. This was tactical planning executed under conditions of extreme danger. And the fact that populations sustained themselves for millennia on megafauna proves that these hunts succeeded far more often than they failed. The fourth thing we underestimate is food. Modern humans panic without refrigeration. We assume that fresh food is the only safe food. We have forgotten that preservation was once as essential as fire itself. Ice Age humans did not have freezers, but they had winter. They understood that frozen meat could be cached and retrieved months later. They understood that fat, when rendered and stored correctly, provided dense calories that could sustain life when hunting failed. They understood that certain organs contained nutrients unavailable in muscle meat, and they consumed them deliberately. This wasn't guesswork. This was nutritional knowledge encoded in practice. Groups that failed to store adequate fat died during the lean months. Groups that wasted organ meat developed deficiencies and weakened. Natural selection was ruthless and immediate. What survived was knowledge. Knowledge of which parts of an animal to eat first, which to dry, which to freeze. Knowledge of how long meat could be left before it spoiled. Knowledge of how to stretch a single kill across weeks or months. This wasn't a primitive version of modern food science. This was a parallel system, solving problems we no longer have because we have outsourced them to supply chains and grocery stores. The fifth thing we underestimate is shelter. Ice Age humans did not simply find shelter. They created it. In regions without caves, they built. Mammoth bone structures have been found across Eastern Europe, carefully arranged with skulls, tusks, and long bones to form frameworks covered with hides. These were not desperate hovels. They were engineered spaces designed to retain heat and resist wind. In snowy environments, they understood what Arctic peoples have always understood. Snow is an insulator. Now, shelter can maintain interior temperatures near freezing, even when the outside air drops to -50. They dug into hillsides. They built windbreaks from stacked stone. They positioned camps to take advantage of natural terrain features that blocked prevailing winds. Every site selection was a calculation. Proximity to water, proximity to game, defensibility, fuel availability. This wasn't wandering. This was strategic occupation of a hostile landscape. The sixth thing we underestimate is knowledge transmission. We live in a world saturated with information. Books, videos, databases. We assume that knowledge is something stored externally, accessed when needed. Ice Age humans had no external storage. Everything they knew existed only in living minds. And yet the complexity of their survival systems suggests knowledge bases that rival anything in the modern world. Not in volume, but in depth. Not in breadth, but in precision. Consider what had to be remembered. The location of water sources that remained unfrozen in winter, the timing of animal migrations year by year adjusted for weather patterns, the properties of dozens of plant species, which were edible, which were medicinal, which were poisonous, the techniques for crafting tools, preparing hides, constructing shelter. This knowledge could not be approximate. A mistake in plant identification meant poisoning. A mistake in migration timing meant starvation. A mistake in tool construction meant a failed hunt. So the knowledge was transmitted with extreme precision, through stories that encoded practical information in memorable narratives, through songs that preserved sequences of action in rhythmic form, through rituals that reinforced critical skills at predictable intervals. This wasn't primitive education. This was an oral technology for preserving life or death information across generations without a single written word.